What's up, everybody? So, Jordan Peterson dropped a conversation he had with Richard Dawkins, mediated by Alex O'Connor, previously known as Cosmic Skeptic. And I thought I would make a response video. A few weeks ago, I made a video entitled Evolution. And this video marks like a real seminal point of my evolution as a person of faith, a believer, a Christian, and the intersection between new atheism, evolution, fundamentalist or literalist Christianity, and metaphorical, psychological, symbolic, and true Christianity as well. I've told this story a few times, but I can distinctly remember walking into a Barnes & Noble in 2009 while I was working at a Christian church camp in Panama City, Florida. And there was a pyramid stack of silver-backed God delusion books, and asking myself, do I believe in a delusion? Or thinking that was kind of scary or something. And I would go on to watch hours and hours of debates between the new atheists and Christians and, John Lennox and many other people, William Lane Craig and the like, and intelligent design and whatnot. And there was really interesting symbolism. Initially, I noticed that there were dinosaur bones in the background of this conversation, but almost 20 years ago, I think it was 2006, John Lennox debated Richard Dawkins in the Museum of Natural History, like underneath a T-Rex, skeleton fossil. And that was just interesting to note at the beginning that there was this thread. And Jordan, the tenor of the conversation was very interesting because it seemed like Richard Dawkins was genuinely interested in Jordan, or had an actual admiration for him, not a presumptuous, smug, and who knows, is that a softening of age, or is it because he got canceled? Richard Dawkins got canceled, and has a modicum of respect for the cultural fight that Peterson has engaged in the last, almost a decade. But the conversation was, not really contentious, really. And there were moments of true fascination, and it was interesting to hear Richard Dawkins say, I actually know that is interesting to me. But there are multiple points in the conversation and I've seen Dawkins do this, like in his other conversations with Dawkins or with O'Connor, where he said, I just don't find that interesting. And it's like the negative tactic to the positive tactic, to where Peterson maybe will evade something by saying, well, let's think about this, or let me tell you this story, as opposed to answering the direct question. And it usually has, the direct question that he's usually being presented with has something to do with the literal historic nature of Scripture being true or not, or being actual fact of history in how it happened as it was written in the text. And so it was very, to take it back to 2017 and in Peterson's seminal conversational series with Sam Harris, where they start talking, they get into the epistemological argument between what is truth, metaphorical truth versus factual truth. And I think Peterson continues to make the argument that approaching the world from a facts are the only form of truth has created a problem. And the place where he gives postmodernists credit is understanding that our understanding of the world is narrative, and that's not the same thing as facts. And there were just multiple points. Peterson did not directly answer the question of, he gave an I don't know ultimately of, did Jesus walk out of the grave? Was he born of an actual virgin? Miracles, whatnot. And I always get this sense. What was interesting is when Alex is pushing Peterson on those points, is he really pushing him out of a curiosity or to try to get the gotcha? And it's really hard to tell, because as soon as Peterson says, yeah, I believe that, then they're like, oh. And then the whole conversation just seems to fall flat or go back into this cyclical new atheist versus Christian literalist argument. And Peterson didn't really let the conversation go there, though he did in his Alex O'Connor conversation of several months ago. But the other piece was that Dawkins his evasion is to say, well, I'm just not interested in symbolism. That's just not interesting to me. But because that doesn't interest you, doesn't mean that it doesn't hold extreme value within the world. And it was so interesting to hear Peterson push back on him in the sense that, that narrative is a fundament to the way that we understand the world. And Dawkins says, I'm just interested in facts, not all this mythos. But in the end, well, before I get to what he said at the end, but the other, Dawkins at one point goes into this conversation about, well, science is what can put a rocket ship on a comet. And in that very, and that's not facts. That is a narrative mythos of an unrealized future that drives a person. Facts don't drive a person. They allow, mathematical fact and proof and cause and effect and experimentation is a process that we use to understand the world in certain ways, and is effective for safe or successful operation of machinery and humans' interaction with it. But what is driving the human to do it is not fact. It is it's mythos. It's vision. It's a story of what maybe could be. It's wanting to see science fiction, see the narrative of science fiction touch the actual, the metaphor of science fiction to touch reality. And it's wild that it doesn't seem like Dawkins can understand that, or he chooses not to. Because at the very end, he says, I want to believe in something that's eternal. He says that. And he talks about, even in a sense, his own legacy, living beyond him and understanding the previous parts of time and seeing that extrapolate out into the future through evolution. And I just don't, it's more frustrating to listen to him talk now versus the idea that you can't prove a miracle doesn't really hold a lot of water for me anymore when it comes to these things, because through personal experience, a 4,000-year-old story, one that Peterson talks about a lot, namely the story of Abraham and Isaac, came throughout my subconscious to somehow affect my life in the real world and make me trust in something that was beyond something that I had ever experienced or believed in. And so it's an archetypal story. And so and even like looking at history in the way that Dawkins wants to look at history is like manuscripts are the only real form of truth. But and he did go on to say that he was interested in the idea that a manuscript or a story could evolve, and I wondered if that was a genuine curiosity that he hadn't considered in a way related to, you know, Holy Scripture. But of course it's evolved, and of course our understandings of it have evolved. And I would give shout outs to, you know, Hezi and Jacob and the conversations that they have about the Old Testament or the Bible, and how the interface between thousands of years of rabbinical tradition evolving the viewpoints of the mythos and text, and then just these ideas of story. And I'm having a conversation come out soon with Justin Wells, where we get into this idea of the archetypal stories that are these historical grooves that reality seems to always be falling into. And so that, so Peterson and Dawkins seem to get to, and I can't rename the principle or the concept that within evolution, something akin and related to memetics and genetic evolution, meeting the Jungian idea of archetypes, like there being a place for synthesis there, was really interesting, because maybe that could be a point of another conversation, and something that they could both go back and work on and put serious effort into a hopeful and positive synthesis of something. Because you can't deny what Peterson was able to, in the same way that what God delusion and the New Atheism was able to inject into a certain part of culture, Peterson and IDW and Peugeot and Vervaeke are doing something similar, reinserting or synthesizing things that have been dissected and atomized within our culture, have been reduced down to it's only facts. And they're saying, no, there are facts, but that's not the whole story. And so he couldn't get Dawkins to get into this more personal place to talk about motive, to talk about desire. He asked a few probing questions, and, you know, about memetics and what was driving Dawkins that allowed him to like land upon something that, and be able to name something. And it was his pursuit, you know, it was his pursuit of his passion, ultimately, of, you know, dealing in what he believes is the fact of truth of how evolution works. So anyways, just here thinking out loud a little bit, having an opportunity to respond to ultimately, I think, a very important conversation. Whether or not it disappoints or meets expectations, I just don't even care, because it's so much more than that culturally, and for me as a person on a journey through time in this life, to the things that I've been paying attention to for the better part of almost 20 years. So anyways, thank you, Dr. Peterson, and thank you, Dr. Dawkins, and thank you, Alex O'Connor, for putting that together. And I hope that it continues to bridge culture, and or be a part of healing culture in a way. So wish I could have done this in my cool studio, and but I'm not. I'm in my work zone. I'm in my working days and hours. And anyways, I thought I would just respond. I'm trying to think if there was any other points. Maybe I'll do a better video. This may just go into the members only section. But yeah. Thank you for your time and your attention.